Martha Collins rubbed her eyes tiredly and glanced at her watch. It was exactly 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and a stack of new cases was already piling up on her desk. 43 years, 20 of them with the Riverdale County Probation Department, had made her one of the most respected supervisors in the department. Martha smoothed her brown hair with its gray streaks and reached for the top folder. Ellis Ryan, she read aloud. 30 years old, paroled after 5 years in prison for securities fraud. She skimmed through the file, noting details: exemplary behavior in prison, participation in educational programs, several letters of recommendation from prison staff. First appointment scheduled for 11 o'clock. Martha sighed. Another day, another case. Good morning. Lisa Montgomery, the new girl, only 6 months on the job, peeked through the door of her small office. You want coffee? Thank you, Lisa. Martha smiled. I'm going to need it strong today. Lots of new charges? Lisa set the steaming cup on the edge of the table. Same as always after the weekend, and you know they're all completely innocent and completely reformed. Martha grinned. How many you got today? 5, including the new one, already studying his case. Lisa nodded and walked out, leaving Martha alone with the papers. In her 20 years on the job, she'd seen hundreds of parolees, repentant and cynical, broken and aggressive. She had learned to see through the masks and was rarely wrong in her assessments. At precisely 11 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Come in, Martha said, setting aside her papers. The door opened, and a young man appeared on the threshold. Martha couldn't help noticing that Ryan Ellis didn't look like a typical ex-convict. He was tall, trim, with attentive brown eyes and an inviting smile. He was dressed in a simple but neat white shirt and dark blue pants. Good morning, Mrs. Collins, he said, extending his hand. I'm Ryan Ellis. Miss Collins, Martha corrected, shaking his hand. Have a seat, Mr. Ellis. His voice was low, slightly husky. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive. Martha pointed to the chair across from her desk. So, she began, opening the folder, I've reviewed your case. Securities fraud, over $500,000 in damages. 5 years in federal prison, of which you served 3 years and 2 months. Parole for 2 years under my supervision. Ryan nodded without averting his gaze. I made a mistake and paid for it, he said calmly. Now I want a fresh start. Martha had heard that phrase 1,000 times, but it sounded sincere when he said it. Tell me about your plans, she suggested. I have a degree in finance, but I realize it's a closed field, Ryan began. In prison, I took programming and web design courses. I've already got a job with a small IT company. I'll be staying with my sister until I get back on my feet. For the next hour, they discussed the terms of probation. Weekly meetings, no leaving the county without permission, regular drug tests, no gun possession. Do you have any questions? Martha asked, closing the folder. Just one, Ryan smiled. Are you always so strict with all your charges? Martha raised an eyebrow. 20 years of experience had taught her to keep a professional distance. Mr. Ellis, my job is to help you successfully complete your probationary period and return to normalcy. Strictness is part of my job. I understand, he nodded. I just want you to know that I've really changed, and I'm going to prove it every day. Something in his gaze made Martha feel uncomfortable for a moment. I'll see you in a week, Mr. Ellis, she said, standing up. Next Thursday, same time. It had been a month of weekly meetings. Ryan was never once late, brought all the necessary paperwork, found a job as a web designer for a small company, and seemed to really be on the mend. How is the work going? Martha asked during their 5th meeting. Not bad, Ryan smiled. The bosses are pleased. I even got a small bonus for the last project. That's good news, Martha nodded. How are things with your coworkers? It's fine, he shrugged. Although I don't really get close to people. After prison, it's hard to trust. He looked at her with such an open, vulnerable expression that Martha felt an unprofessional prick of sympathy. It's normal, she said more gently. Adaptation takes time. You know, Ryan said suddenly, you're the first person outside the family I'm not afraid to tell the truth to. I guess that sounds weird. It's my job to listen and help, Martha replied, but she felt slightly embarrassed. By the 3rd month of meetings, Martha began to notice a change in her attitude toward Ryan Ellis. She began to look forward to their weekly conversations. His stories about prison, about how he'd reinvented his life, about learning to program at night when everyone else was asleep. All of it made her inappropriately admire him. "You've been a little distracted lately," Lisa remarked, when she came into her office on Friday afternoon. "I'm just tired," Martha dismissed it. "Did you change your hair?" Lisa asked suspiciously. "And is that a new blouse?" Martha felt the blood rushing to her cheeks. "I just decided to update my closet. At 43, a woman has a right to look attractive." Lisa snorted incredulously but said nothing. The next week, as their meeting with Ryan was drawing to a close, he said suddenly, "You're a very beautiful woman, Miss Collins." Martha froze, not knowing how to respond. "Mr. Ellis, our relationship must remain strictly professional." "Of course," he smiled. "Just thought it was nice to hear the truth sometimes, even from an underling." When he left, Martha sat motionless for a long time, staring at the wall. 20 years she'd kept her distance. 20 years none of the wards had broken through her defenses. "I think there's something going on between you and Ellis," Lisa said bluntly 2 weeks later, when they were having lunch together at a cafe near the office. Martha almost choked on her coffee. "What are you talking about?" "You blush when he comes over. You always find an excuse to keep him longer. Martha, are you all right?" "Don't be silly," Martha snapped at him. "He's just one of the wards." "James noticed," Lisa added quietly. "He asked me if you were all right." Martha froze. James Hope was her boss and an old friend. If he suspected anything, "Everything's absolutely fine," she cut him off. "And I'd rather you and James do your jobs than discuss me." It was Thursday, exactly 4 months after their first meeting. Ryan was the last one to arrive at 5 o'clock that evening. The office was almost empty by then. "How was your week?" Martha asked, trying to sound professional. "Good." He smiled, that special smile that she now knew was meant only for her. "Got a promotion." "Congratulations," she said sincerely. "That's great news." They talked about the job, about his plans, about how he was going to compensate the victims of his fraud. When the formal part was over, he suddenly asked, "Have you ever broken the rules, Miss Collins?" Martha tensed. "What do you mean?" "Rules, conditionality, things that are supposed to hold us back but sometimes only get in the way of living." He looked her straight in the eye, and Martha felt herself blush. "Mr. Ellis, I think we should—" "Ryan," he interrupted gently. "When we're alone, I'd like you to call me Ryan." "It's unprofessional," she objected weakly. "Is the way you look at me every time professional?" He leaned closer. "I see it, Martha. I see everything." She should have stopped him, should have pressed the button to call security, should have remembered 20 years of impeccable service. Instead, she let him take her hand. "I know a cafe not far from here," he said quietly. "None of your colleagues go there." That was the first step. The cafe, conversations, no longer as inspector and ward, but as man and woman. Then there was his apartment, the small but neat studio he'd rented when he'd been promoted. Martha knew she was breaking every possible rule, that she was risking her career, her reputation, everything. But Ryan was looking at her like no one had looked at her in years, with desire, admiration, lust. "What are you thinking about?" he asked one night as they lay in his bed. "About being crazy," she answered honestly. "No." He stroked her cheek. "You're just finally starting to live." Only in rare moments of sobriety did Martha realize how deep she'd gone, how skillfully he had manipulated her from the beginning, how gradually, step by step, he had broken down her professional defenses. But even then, she couldn't stop. In the office, Lisa was now openly eyeing her with judgment. James called her in for a serious talk. "Martha, what's going on?" he asked bluntly. "You're changing in front of his eyes. You're late. You're forgetting appointments. You seem distracted." "I'm just tired," she lied. "Too much work." "If you need a vacation—" "No," she answered too hastily. "I'm fine," but nothing was all right, and somewhere deep inside Martha knew it. Ryan was acting strange that night. He was brooding, silent, avoiding looking her in the eye. "Was something wrong?" she asked as they lay in the dark. "Martha," he began after a long pause, "there's something I have to tell you." She turned to him, feeling herself grow cold inside. "What is it?" He was silent for a long time, staring at the ceiling. "No, nothing," he finally said. "It's just, I never thought I'd meet a woman like you." He kissed her, but Martha sensed something was wrong. Something Ryan didn't want to talk about, something important he was hiding. But she didn't insist. Not that night. It was probably her last big mistake. It had been 3 months since Martha had crossed that invisible line. 3 months of secret meetings, calls from unknown numbers, lying to co-workers. She and Ryan usually met at his apartment or at a motel on the outskirts of town, where Martha arrived after making sure no one was following her. Each time, she told herself that this was the last time she'd see him, that tomorrow she'd end it all. And each time she went back to him, Lisa had stopped asking. Now she just looked at Martha with silent disapproval. And James began to gradually hand her cases over to other inspectors, leaving her with only a few wards, including Ryan. "You need rest," he told her once. "You look exhausted." She was exhausted, the endless lies, the constant fear of being exposed, but most of all, the painful dependence on Ryan. Like a drug, he had infiltrated her life, subjugated her to his will, made her forget everything. Her daughter called her less and less. The last time they saw each other, Carol said bluntly, "Mom, you look terrible. What's going on with you?" Martha brushed it off. How could she explain to her adult daughter that her mother, an experienced probation officer with 20 years' experience, was losing her head over a 30-year-old ex-convict? One night, lying in Ryan's bed, she suddenly asked, "What are we doing, Ryan?" He turned to her, propping himself up on his elbow. "What do you mean? This whole thing, where is it going?" Martha stared at the ceiling, afraid to meet his gaze. Ryan was silent for so long that she finally turned to him. "We live in the present," he finally answered. "Isn't that enough?" It was impossible to read anything definite in his eyes, as always. Sometimes Martha felt as if she didn't know the man at all. "And what if someone finds out?" "Who would find out?" He shrugged. "We're being careful. Lisa is suspicious, and James. They have no proof." Ryan reached up and kissed her. "Don't worry about that." And she didn't worry about it, not until later. The first symptoms appeared at the end of the 4th month of their relationship. At first it was just fatigue, a deep, abiding fatigue that even a full night's sleep didn't relieve. Then it was irritation in her throat and enlarged lymph nodes. Martha wrote it all off as stress and overwork. Until a rash appeared, small red spots on her chest and back that didn't itch or hurt, but were alarming. "You need to see a doctor," Lisa said, noticing Martha rubbing her neck during her lunch break. "You haven't looked healthy in weeks. It's just a lingering cold." Martha brushed it off, but made an appointment that same day. Dr. Harris, her family doctor for 15 years, examined her carefully, listened to her complaints, and ordered the standard blood tests. "I'd also recommend an HIV test," he added at the end of the appointment, "just to rule it out, given the enlarged lymph nodes and rash." "HIV?" Martha almost laughed. "Dr. Harris, I'm 43 years old. I'm not promiscuous." "Martha," the doctor said gently, "anyone can have HIV, regardless of age or lifestyle. It's just standard procedure." She agreed, more to avoid offending the doctor than out of any real concern. The results were due in a week. That week went by as usual. Work, secret meetings with Ryan, endless lies. On Wednesday morning, she got a call from the clinic asking her to come in person to get the results. Something in the nurse's voice made Martha tense. Dr. Harris looked serious as she entered his office. "Sit down, Martha," he said, pointing to a chair. And that's when she realized, even before he said it out loud. "You've tested positive for HIV," Dr. Harris said. "We'll retest to confirm, of course, but the first test is pretty reliable." Martha heard her voice as if from the outside. "It's impossible. There must be a mistake." "It is possible," the doctor nodded, though his eyes said otherwise. "But Martha, I must ask, have you had unprotected intercourse in the last 6 months?" She didn't answer. The image of Ryan was in front of her eyes, his smile, his eyes, his hands on her body. "Martha?" Dr. Harris's voice brought her back to reality. "Yes," she whispered. "There was a man. You need to let him know," the doctor said seriously. "And anyone else you've had contact with." She nodded, unable to utter a word. "It's not a death sentence," the doctor continued, seeing her condition. Modern therapy can keep the virus under control. You will be able to live a full life. But the sooner we start treatment, the better. Martha listened to him, but the words seemed to pass her consciousness. There was only one thought in her head. Ryan knew. He had to know. When she left the clinic, she dialed his number immediately. "We need to meet," she said when he answered. "Right now." "I'm at work," Ryan started. "I don't care," her voice shook. "I'll be at your place in 30 minutes. If you're not there, I'll come to your office." There was a pause. "Okay," he finally said. "I'll be home." Martha drove on autopilot, unable to see the road. Her mind was filled with fragments of memories, the night Ryan had been especially silent. The night he'd wanted to say something to her but hadn't. How she hadn't insisted. How she'd believed his kisses and caresses, turning a blind eye to his past, to his lies. When she knocked on his apartment door, the rage inside reached such a fever pitch that Martha could barely contain herself from screaming. Ryan opened the door. He was calm and collected, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "You knew," Martha said as she walked in and slammed the door behind her. "You bloody knew everything. What are you talking about?" His face expressed utter incomprehension, but his eyes remained cold. "Don't you dare!" she almost screamed. "Don't you dare pretend you don't understand! I have HIV, Ryan! I have HIV! And the only person I could have gotten it from is you!" He was silent, looking at her with an unreadable expression. "Say something." She shoved him in the chest, unable to contain her anger. "Admit it. You knew your status when you seduced me. Was this your revenge? For what? For getting you locked up by the system? For getting caught cheating?" "I didn't know," he finally said, but there was no remorse or shock in his voice. "When we started dating, I didn't know." "You're lying," Martha hissed. "You found out later, but you didn't tell me. That night when you were so strangely brooding. You wanted to tell me something, but you changed your mind. That was about it, wasn't it?" Ryan stepped back to the window, turning his back to her. "Yeah," he finally admitted. "I found out 2 months ago. Took the test after I found out my ex-cellmate was infected." "And you didn't tell me?" Martha felt the ground slipping from under her feet. "You kept sleeping with me knowing you could infect me?" "I used protection," Ryan shrugged. "Not always," she exclaimed. "And condoms aren't 100% guaranteed. You should have told me." "And what difference would that have made?" He turned around, and for the first time something resembling an emotion appeared on his face. Anger. "Would you have left me? Report me to your superiors? Sent me back to prison? I had a right to know." Martha grabbed the vase from the table and threw it at the wall. The vase shattered, splintering all over the floor. "You ruined my life." "You ruined your own life," Ryan replied coldly. "The moment you decided it was a good idea to sleep with your mentee. I didn't ask you to do that. You came to my bed." His words hurt more than a slap in the face, because there was some truth to them. "You manipulated me from the beginning," she said quietly. "Played on my loneliness, my complexes. Was that part of the plan?" "What plan?" He grinned. "Do you think I contracted HIV on purpose so I could pass it on to you? Even for me, it's too complicated a scheme. But you didn't tell me when you found out." Martha felt tears running down her cheeks. "Why, Ryan, do you really hate me that much?" "I don't hate you," he shrugged. "I needed you. I still need you." "For what?" "For parole, of course." He grinned. "You're my inspector, Martha. The one who decides if I'm violating my parole. Do you think any inspector would turn a blind eye to my tardiness? My missing tests? My skipping town?" Martha froze, trying to comprehend his words. "You've been using me," she whispered. "All this time." "You used me just as much," Ryan replied calmly. "You liked feeling wanted, liked the danger, the forbiddenness of our relationship. I gave you what you wanted. You gave me what I needed. Sounds like a fair trade to me." "Fair?" Martha exclaimed. "You gave me a deadly disease." "HIV hasn't been fatal for a long time," he said coldly. "With the right treatment, you'll live a long, happy life. And my career? My reputation? What will I tell my colleagues? My daughter?" "That's your problem." Ryan turned away. "I didn't ask you to violate professional ethics." Something inside Martha broke at that moment. She suddenly saw Ryan for what he really was, a cold, calculating manipulator for whom she had never been a person, only a tool. "You're a monster," she whispered. "And you're naive," he replied, pouring himself a whiskey. "Prison makes people either broken or strong. I chose the latter. I'll notify the police." Martha straightened. "It's a felony to knowingly infect someone with HIV. Isn't it?" Ryan grinned. "What are you going to tell them? That you slept with your mentee? That you violated all professional standards? That you covered up my parole violations? I'm sure your superiors will be thrilled." He was right, and she knew it. Reporting to the police meant the end of her career, public shame, maybe even prosecution for malpractice. "You realize you have no way out," Ryan continued, taking a sip of whiskey. "We're bound now, forever, by the virus in our blood and the secrets we keep from each other." "I'll find a way to destroy you," Martha said quietly, and there was such confidence in her voice that Ryan's smile faltered for a moment. "Don't do anything stupid," he warned. "I'm warning you." "You're the one who underestimates me," Martha said as she slowly made her way toward the exit. "You don't know what a woman with nothing to lose is capable of." "Martha," he grabbed her arm. "Think about it. We can work this out differently." She wrenched her hand away and swung the door open. "Don't you ever touch me again," she hissed. "I'd rather die than let you lay a finger on me again." Martha paused in the stairwell, trying to control her trembling. Her thoughts were confused. What to do next? Where to go? How to live with this stigma, with the realization of her own stupidity, with the bitterness of betrayal? She pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number. "Lisa?" Her voice treacherously trembled. "Can you meet me? I need to talk. It's very important." "Where are you?" Lisa sounded worried. Martha gave the address of a roadside cafe about a mile from Ryan's house. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Lisa said. "Wait for me there." As they got into the car, Martha stared at the windows of Ryan's apartment for a long time. Behind one of them stood the man who had ruined her life, the man she'd let into her heart, the man who had infected her with a disease for which there was no cure. Hatred rose up from within, overshadowing all other senses. Hate and a thirst for revenge. She would make him pay, at any cost. Starting the car, Martha took one last look at the house where she'd left a piece of her soul and pulled onto the road. What happened next changed the fates of both of them forever. Rain drummed on the pavement as the on-duty patrol received the call. The anonymous call reported suspicious noises at a house at 36 Maple Street. Officers Thompson and Rodriguez arrived on scene 12 minutes later. The front door appeared to be ajar. The officers looked at each other and drew their service weapons and cautiously stepped inside. "Police! Anybody there?" Thompson shouted, but there was only silence. Rodriguez pointed to the footprints on the floor. Dark stains led deep into the apartment. They moved slowly down the hallway, checking the rooms one by one. The kitchen was empty. The living room was chaos, an overturned coffee table, a broken vase, an overturned chair, and a body. It lay between the sofa and the window, partially hidden by an overturned floor lamp. A large pool of blood spread across the light-colored carpet, already beginning to dry at the edges. "Shit," Thompson exhaled, lowering his weapon. "Tell dispatch we got a body, and call the detectives." Rodriguez nodded, pulling out his walkie-talkie. Thompson approached the body cautiously, careful not to step on any possible evidence. He bent down to check for a pulse, though it was obviously pointless, given the amount of blood and the gaping wound on his throat. "Knife, it looks like," he muttered. Carotid artery severed. Death was quick. "Detectives are on their way," Rodriguez reported, coming back into the room. "So is forensics. We're under orders not to let anyone in or touch anything." "See if you can find any ID?" Thompson asked. "We need to find out whose apartment this is." 45 minutes later, the crime scene was swarming with people. Forensic technicians in white coveralls were photographing evidence, collecting samples, taking prints. The medical examiner was examining the body, dictating observations to an assistant. Detective David Russo, 49 years old, 23 years on the force, the last 12 in homicide, stood in the doorway watching the team work. Tall, with graying temples and attentive gray eyes, he was known for being methodical and persistent. Russo never jumped to conclusions, preferring to gather all the facts first. "What have we got?" he asked, turning to the medical examiner. "Male, early 30s, he replied, still working. "Death occurred about 12 or 14 hours ago, caused by acute blood loss from a severed carotid artery. The weapon was something sharp, possibly a kitchen knife." "Did you find the knife?" "No, detective. Killer probably took it with him." Russo nodded and looked at the pictures on the wall. They showed a young man, the same one who was now lying on the floor in a pool of his own blood. In the photos, he was smiling while embracing a beautiful middle-aged woman. "Did you get an ID?" "Yes," one of the officers answered. "Ryan Ellis, 30 years old. He's been renting for 4 months. Paperwork in his desk drawer says he's a recent parolee. Served time for fraud." Russo picked up the framed photo, scrutinizing the woman next to the victim. "Who's she? We haven't identified her yet. Could be a friend or a relative." "Find her." Russo returned the photograph to the shelf. "And find out who his probation officer is." "Already done," said the young officer, looking through the paperwork at his desk. "Martha Collins, Riverdale County Probation Officer. They're already trying to find her." Russo walked slowly around the room, scrutinizing the crime scene. The broken vase, the overturned table, the general disarray, everything spoke of a struggle. A cell phone with a cracked screen lay on the floor by the window. Next to the body, a broken glass smelling of alcohol. "Did you canvass the neighborhood?" "Yeah," Officer Thompson nodded. "The woman across the hall heard a loud argument around 6 o'clock last night. A male and a female voice. Then something broke and it got quiet. She didn't think much of it. Said the guy often brought women over, and sometimes it got noisy." "Any description of the woman?" "Just that she was older than the victim. Neighbor saw her a few times, but never spoke to her. Dark hair, medium height, well-dressed." Russo made a note in his notebook. "Check the cameras in the entryway and on the street. We need to know who visited him yesterday." That's when another officer appeared in the doorway. "Detective, we found something interesting in the bedroom." In a small bedroom with a minimalist interior, the forensic officers were finishing collecting evidence. One of them pointed to the bedside table. In the drawer, they found this. Russo leaned over. In the drawer was a box of pills, an antiretroviral therapy used to treat HIV. "The victim was HIV positive," the detective stated. "That could be important. Check his medical records, see when he was diagnosed. And one more thing," the CSI pointed to the trash can next to the bed. "Used condoms, at least 2, and they look fresh, a day or 2 at the most. Collect DNA for analysis," Russo ordered. "It might help us find his last visitor." Back in the living room, the detective saw that the body was already being packed for transportation to the morgue. He took another close look around the room, trying to visualize what had happened here. An argument, a struggle, then the stabbing, quick, precise, deadly. The killer knew where to hit. Accident or intent? "Detective," an officer approached him. "We found Martha Collins. She's in the hospital." "Hospital?" Russo raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong with her?" "It's unknown. Her co-worker said Collins called her last night under a lot of stress, asked for a meeting, but she didn't show up for the meeting. This morning, her co-worker found her unconscious in her apartment and called an ambulance." "What hospital is she in?" "Memorial ICU. I'm on my way there. Russo's on his way out. Keep collecting evidence and canvassing the neighborhood, and find the woman in the photo." Memorial Hospital greeted the detective with sterile cleanliness and the smell of antiseptic. At the front desk, he was directed to the ICU. At the entrance to the ward, he noticed a young woman in an austere suit nervously pacing the hallway. "Lisa Montgomery?" Russo asked, approaching her and showing her his badge. "Detective David Russo, homicide. Are you a colleague of Miss Collins?" The woman nodded, looking anxiously at the detective. "What happened to Ryan Ellis?" she asked. "I'm told the police are looking for Martha in connection with some sort of murder." "Mr. Ellis was found dead in his apartment," Russo reported. "I need to speak to Miss Collins." "What's wrong with her?" Lisa looked away. "An overdose of sleeping pills. I found her in her apartment this morning. She didn't show up for our meeting last night, didn't answer her cell phone. I got worried, so I went over there." Is she conscious? She was an hour ago, but the doctors won't allow long conversations. She's very weak. I need to talk to her, Russo said insistently. It could be connected to the murder. Lisa hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I'll walk you out, but please don't tire her out. In the ICU, Martha Collins looked like a pale shadow of the woman in the photograph, the droopy face, the dark circles under her eyes, the lifeless look. She turned her head as the detective and Lisa entered the room. Martha, Lisa began softly. This is Detective Russo. He wants to ask you some questions. Martha slowly shifted her gaze to the detective. There was no surprise or fear in her eyes, only endless fatigue. Miss Collins, Russo stepped closer to the bed. I'm sorry to bother you, but something serious has happened. Ryan Ellis has been found dead in his apartment. She didn't show any surprise, just closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. When? She asked quietly. Supposedly last night, about the time you were supposed to meet Miss Montgomery. Martha turned her head toward Lisa. Can you give us some privacy? Lisa hesitated, but then nodded and left the room. Russo pulled a chair over and sat next to the bed. Miss Collins, I need to know about your relationship with Ryan Ellis. Martha was silent for a long time, as if gathering her strength. He was my ward, she finally said. Paroled under my supervision. That's all? Russo asked softly. We found pictures of you together in his apartment. Again, a pause. Then a bitter laugh. What does it matter now? I'm investigating a murder, Miss Collins. Everything matters. She turned her head and looked straight into the detective's eyes. We had a relationship. Unprofessional, unethical, whatever you want to call it. Yes, I slept with my ward. And yes, I broke every possible rule and risked my career. When did this relationship begin? 4 months ago, about a month after he was released. What happened yesterday? Martha closed her eyes and a tear rolled down her cheek. I found out he'd given me HIV, intentionally. He knew his status and kept it from me. Russo made a note in his notebook. Now the picture was coming together. You met with him yesterday? Yes. I went to see him right after the clinic where I was diagnosed. We, had a fight. How bad? Bad enough for me to smash a vase against the wall, she answered quietly. He was cold, indifferent, said he was using me to make his parole easier, that it was my own fault. And then what happened? I left. I called Lisa, arranged to meet. But, I couldn't. I just went home, drank whiskey and sleeping pills. I don't remember how many pills. I just wanted to stop feeling. What time did you leave, Ellis? Martha frowned, trying to remember. About 6 o'clock in the evening, maybe a little later. And you went straight home? Yes. No. She hesitated. I sat in the car for a while. I watched his windows. I don't know how much time passed. Russo stared at her carefully, trying to see the truth behind her tired eyes. There was something she wasn't telling him. Miss Collins, do you have a kitchen knife with a wooden handle? She flinched and looked at him with sudden fear. What? A kitchen knife, probably with your fingerprints on it. I have knives in the kitchen, she said slowly, like everyone else's. I don't remember what kind of handles they have. Did you go back to Ellis's apartment last night? No, she answered too quickly. Miss Collins, do you realize that lying during a murder investigation? I didn't kill him, she said with strength in her voice. Yes, I hated him at the time. Yes, I wanted him to pay for what he did. But I'm not a murderer. Russo decided to change tactics. Who else knew about your relationship? Martha looked away. Lisa suspected. And my boss, James Hope, but I never admitted it to them. Who else would have had a motive to kill Ellis? I don't know. She shook her head. He was a complicated man, a manipulator. I may not have been the only one he used. Did he have other women? Perhaps, Martha answered quietly. Yeah, I didn't ask. At that moment, a nurse entered the room. Excuse me, detective, but the patient needs to rest. Russo nodded and stood up. We'll talk again, Miss Collins. Feel better. As he left the room, he saw Lisa waiting in the hallway. How long have you known about their relationship? He asked her bluntly. Lisa sighed. I suspected about 2 months ago. Martha was changing before his eyes. Absent-minded, changing her appearance, always finding reasons to stay out late with Ellis. But she never admitted it. What can you tell us about last night? What time did she call you? It was around 6:30. She sounded, broken. Asked me to meet her at Joe's in 20 minutes. I got there, waited an hour and a half, but she didn't show up. Did you try calling her? Of course I did. Her cell phone was unavailable. I got worried, but I figured she'd just changed her mind. I went to her apartment this morning and found her unconscious. What condition was the apartment in? Lisa frowned. Normal. Maybe a bit of a mess. A bottle of whiskey on the table, an empty sleeping pill bottle. I called an ambulance right away. Did you notice anything unusual? Blood on your clothes, maybe? A knife? No. Lisa shook her head firmly. Nothing like that. Detective, you don't think Martha could have... I'm just gathering facts, Miss Montgomery. One more question. Do you know anything about Miss Collins's diagnosis? Lisa turned pale. What diagnosis? I see. Russo nodded. Thank you for your help. If you remember anything, call me. He handed her his card and headed for the exit. On the way back to the station, he called the office. See if Martha Collins had access to any weapons, he ordered. And get me James Hope from the probation office. I need to talk to him as soon as possible. CSI Sarah Chen met Russo at the station with a folder of preliminary results. We've got something interesting, she said, laying the photos on the table. We found prints from at least 3 people in the victim's apartment. One set belongs to Ellis himself. The second is believed to be Martha Collins. Her prints are in the database as a law enforcement officer, but there's a third set, unidentified. Where exactly? On the window frame, bedroom doorknob, and one of the glasses. Could be another visitor. What about the DNA from the condoms? It'll take a while to analyze, but I can tell you that there's probably at least 2 different women. One of them is probably Collins, but the other is unknown. Russo rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Ellis was seeing someone else. Probably another woman who was unaware of his status. One more thing, Sarah continued. We checked Ellis's medical records. He was diagnosed with HIV 2 months ago during a routine checkup at the prison hospital. By law, he should have notified all his partners. But he didn't, Russo finished. At least with Collins. And that's a felony. At that moment, a young officer entered the office. Detective, we found surveillance footage near the victim's house. You need to see this. The computer screen played a fuzzy black and white recording from a security camera mounted on a neighboring building. It showed the entrance to the house where Ellis lived. Here, the officer pointed to the screen. 17:15 yesterday afternoon. Martha Collins enters the building. Russo leaned closer. The tape clearly showed a woman walking determinedly toward the entrance. Martha Collins, no doubt. And here she comes out. The officer fast-forwarded the tape. 18:25, you see that? She's clearly upset. Russo nodded. The time frame matched Martha's statement. What else? Now for the best part. The officer rewound the tape even further. 21:30, same evening. The screen showed the figure of a woman entering the building. The poor quality of the tape and the darkness made it hard to see her face, but her build and movements resembled Martha's. Is that her? Russo asked, staring at the screen. Looks like it, the officer nodded. Now watch this. He fast-forwarded some more. 22:10, she's coming out. The woman quickly exited the building and got into a car parked across the street. The camera didn't capture the license plate. Check the cameras on the surrounding streets, Russo ordered. We need to track where that car went. Already on it. What about Ellis? Did he leave the house last night? No, the officer shook his head. At least not through the front door. Russo tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. The picture was not looking good for Martha Collins. Motive, opportunity, alleged return to the scene of the crime after the initial altercation. What about the search warrant for Collins's apartment? Should be here in an hour. Cell phone rings. Great. Also, find me that woman from the photos in Ellis's apartment. She might be a clue. 2 hours later, a team of detectives were searching Martha Collins' apartment. The tidy, tastefully furnished 2-bedroom apartment didn't look like a killer's place. They found a set of knives in the kitchen, one missing. Nothing suspicious in the bedroom, one of the officers reported. Just a packet of sleeping pills on the bedside table, and some empty wine bottles in the trash. What about the bathroom? It's clean. No traces of blood. Russo scrutinized the hall closet. He noticed a garbage bag on the floor in the corner. What's in here? He carefully opened the bag. Inside were a woman's clothes, blouse, pants, shoes, and it was all stained with blood. Bingo, the detective said quietly. Bag this for forensics, and check the house for weapons. Meanwhile, James Hope, Martha Collins' supervisor, was brought into the station. Tall man with a graying beard looked worried. Detective Russo? He held out his hand. James Hope. What's going on? I'm told Martha's in the hospital and her ward's been murdered. Have a seat, Mr. Hope. Russo pointed to a chair. I need to ask you some questions about Miss Collins and Ryan Ellis. Sure. Hope nodded. What can I do to help? Were you aware of a personal relationship between Collins and Ellis? Hope paused, then sighed. I suspected. Martha had changed a lot in recent months. She'd become absent-minded, often late, forgetting appointments. It wasn't like her. Did you talk to her about it? Yes, but she denied it, claimed she was just tired. How long have you known Miss Collins? Almost 15 years, Hope replied. She's one of the best inspectors in our department, or was until recently. Is she capable of violence? Hope straightened up. What do you mean? A simple question, Mr. Hope. In your opinion, is Martha Collins capable of killing a man? Absolutely not, Hope replied firmly. Martha has always been balanced, rational. Even with the most difficult subjects, she remained calm. What if she had found out that Ellis had deliberately infected her with HIV? Would that have changed her character? Hope turned pale. What? Martha's infected? Yes, and according to her, the source of the infection was Ellis, who knew of her status but didn't inform her. Hope rubbed his face with his hands. My God, I didn't know. So what do you think? Could she have reacted violently to such a betrayal? Hope was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Anyone can snap in a situation like that. But murder? I still don't believe she could have killed him, Hope finished. Even in that situation. Russo nodded thoughtfully. One more question. Do you know of any other women Ellis might have dated? Maybe he mentioned someone during the background checks? Hope shook his head. I rarely had direct contact with him. That was Martha's job. But, he hesitated. There was one woman who often asked about him. Who? A woman named Carol Raymond. She volunteers at an ex-convict rehabilitation program. Pretty attractive, mid-30s to mid-40s. She led a support group that Ellis attended. Russo made a note in his notebook. Do you have her contacts? The office should have them. I can call and find out. Please do. While Hope was calling the office, an officer entered with a new report. Detective, we have the forensic results on the clothes from Collins' apartment. The blood belongs to Ellis. And there were microparticles found on the sleeve of the blouse that matched the carpet fibers from his apartment. Russo nodded slowly. The evidence was lining up clearly. What about the alleged murder weapon? No knife was found, but a kitchen knife with partially obliterated prints was found in a dumpster 2 blocks from the Collins house. The lab's working on recovery. Good. Cell phone ringing. Keep looking. Hope finished his phone call. Here are Carol Raymond's contacts. He held out a piece of paper. Is there anything else I can do to help? Not yet, Mr. Hope, but stay in touch. You may be needed for additional questions. After Hope left, Russo immediately ordered a search for Carol Raymond. An hour later, she was brought to the station, an elegant woman with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. Miss Raymond, Russo shook her hand. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. Did I have a choice? She asked coldly, sitting down in the chair offered. The officer said it was about Ryan Ellis. Yes. Unfortunately, Mr. Ellis was found dead last night. Carol went pale. What? How did that happen? He was murdered in his apartment, stab wound to the neck. I'm told you knew him well? Not that well. She looked away. He was in a rehab program where I run a support group. That's it? Russo asked softly. Miss Raymond, we have reason to believe that your relationship with Mr. Ellis was more personal than that. She was quiet for a moment, then sighed. We dated for a while. It was unprofessional of me, I know. When did your relationship begin? About 3 months ago. Ryan was very, charming. He had a way with people. Did you go to his apartment? A few times, yeah. When was the last time you saw him? Carol tensed. The night before last. We, spent the night together. At his apartment? Yes. Do you know anything about his HIV status? Carol looked up sharply. What? Ryan Ellis was HIV positive. He was diagnosed about 2 months ago. He didn't tell you? You could see on her face that this was news to her. No, my God, no. We've always used protection, but... Miss Raymond, you should get tested, Russo said softly, for your own peace of mind. She nodded, still in shock. I can't believe. He didn't say anything. Are you aware of any other women in his life? He mentioned that he was seeing someone else, but he didn't name names. I didn't insist. Our relationship wasn't exclusive. What do you know about his relationship with Martha Collins? With his inspector? Carol frowned. Nothing much. He said she was strict but fair. He never mentioned a personal relationship with her? No, never. Carol looked genuinely surprised. Do you think they... We have proof of their connection, Russo confirmed. And one more thing. Miss Collins is also infected with HIV, presumably from Ellis. Carol put her hand to her mouth. Oh my God, that bastard! Where were you last night between 6 and 10 o'clock? Yeah, she stammered. I was at home, alone. Can anyone confirm that? No, I live alone. Russo looked at her carefully. Miss Raymond, did you know that Ellis was using women, manipulated them? I was beginning to suspect, she answered quietly. He was very good at persuasion, always knew what to say, but I didn't think he was capable of deliberately putting anyone in danger. Did you see his car last night outside his house? No, she shook her head. I wasn't there, I swear. At that moment, there was a knock on the office and an officer entered with a new report. Detective, forensics have finished analyzing the DNA from the condoms. One of them definitely belongs to Miss Raymond. Carol blushed but didn't look away. I don't deny I was with him, but I didn't kill him. Russo looked at her thoughtfully. Miss Raymond, I'll be frank with you. I have 2 women, both had an affair with the victim, both are or may have been infected by him, both have no solid alibi for the time of the murder. It doesn't look good for you or Miss Collins. I didn't know of his status until just now, Carol replied firmly. I had no motive, and I certainly didn't know about Martha Collins. Check the security footage. Russo turned to the officer. Compare the figure of the woman entering the Ellis house at 9:30 p.m. with Miss Raymond. You got it, detective. When the officer left, Russo turned to Carol again. Did you know about the knife, the one that was always in Ellis's kitchen? The knife? She frowned. I didn't pay much attention to his kitchen utensils. We rarely cooked. One last question, Miss Raymond. If you found out that Ellis had deliberately exposed you to HIV, how would you react? She looked at the detective for a long moment, then said quietly, I would hate him, but I wouldn't kill him. Thank you for your cooperation. Russo stood up. You're free to go for now, but don't leave town. After Carol Raymond left, the detective sat for a long time going over his notes. 2 women, both duped by the same man, both with motive. But only one was found to have bloody clothes and evidence of returning to the scene of the crime. Detective, CSI Sarah Chen entered the office. We have new results on the trash can knife. Traces of Ellis's blood and partially recovered prints, presumably Martha Collins. Presumably? The quality isn't perfect, but it's a 7-point match. Russo nodded. That's enough for an arrest warrant. And what about the security cameras? The woman on the tape entering the house at 9:30 is definitely not Carol Raymond. Height and build are consistent with Martha Collins. Russo exhaled slowly. Everything pointed to one person. Prepare the paperwork to arrest Martha Collins on the charge of first-degree murder. The next day, Martha Collins was transferred from the hospital into custody. After the formal arraignment, Russo was cleared for another interrogation. Martha sat in the interrogation room, pale but collected. Miss Collins, Russo began, we have irrefutable evidence that you went back to Ryan Ellis's apartment last night around 9:30 and killed him. Martha was silent, looking at her hands. Surveillance cameras recorded you coming and going. Bloody clothes were found in your apartment. A knife with your fingerprints and the victim's blood was found nearby. You had motive, opportunity, and evidence at the crime scene. She looked up. I want to speak to a lawyer. Of course, that's your right, but I think there's something else you should hear. Russo opened the folder. We found Carol Raymond. She was Ellis's mistress, too. Martha's face showed no surprise. Like you, she didn't know about his HIV status. And like you, she was deceived and used. What do you want from me? Martha asked quietly. The truth. What happened last night? Why did you come back? Martha was silent for a long time, then sighed heavily. I wanted to get him to confess, to record that confession, use it as evidence against him. And what went wrong? He laughed. Her voice trembled. He laughed at me, said no one would believe me, that it was my own fault, that I meant nothing to him, just a convenient way to ease the probation conditions. And you grabbed the knife? I don't remember, she whispered. All I remember is his laughter, and then the blood everywhere. Do you realize this is a confession? I understand only one thing. Martha looked up. It wasn't just my life he ruined. How many other women has he infected? How many lives has he wrecked? That doesn't justify murder, Miss Collins. I know, she replied quietly. I am ready to be punished, but I'm not sorry. Martha Collins was subsequently charged with second-degree murder. Given the circumstances, the prosecutor agreed to a deal, 12 years with the possibility of parole in 8. Epilogue 5 years later. The prison library at the State Women's Correctional Facility was a quiet place. Martha Collins, now 48 years old, arranged books on the shelves. Working in the library was one of the few joys in her new life. A visitor for prisoner Collins, the guard announced from the doorway. Martha looked up in surprise. She rarely had visitors. Her daughter came once every few months, but she wasn't supposed to have one today. Waiting for her in the visiting room was Carol Raymond. 5 years had changed her. She looked older, more serious. Hello, Martha, she said as Martha sat down across from her. Carol? What are you doing here? I wanted to talk to you. Carol interlocked her fingers nervously. To see how you're doing. Why? Martha asked bluntly. We don't even know each other. But we have one person in common, and the same disease, Carol replied quietly. I took a test after he died. It was positive. Martha was silent, not knowing what to say. I don't blame you, Carol continued, for what you did. Sometimes I think I would have done the same thing if I were you. I am guilty, Martha said firmly, and I'm serving the punishment I deserve. I know you are, but I came here to tell you that I've set up a foundation for women infected by partners who knew their status but hid it, for women whose lives have been ruined just like ours. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to offer you a job. When you get out, your experience, both as an inspector and as a victim, could help others. Martha took a long look at the woman across from her. Why are you doing this? Because we all deserve a second chance, Carol replied simply. Even you, especially you. Martha didn't answer, but something changed in her eyes, a spark of hope for the first time in 5 years. Outside the visiting room window, a new day was beginning, and for two women whose fates had been irrevocably changed by one man, perhaps a new chapter was beginning. The end.